When I told my friend I was moving to Spain, I remember that the first reaction was like, oh my god, you're so lucky, it's so cheap, you're gonna have the best sunny life in Spain. And I remember, like, I was so innocent at the time also. I just imagined that Spain was just going to be so much cheaper, and I didn't even consider like different regions depending on, you know, that where I would live in Spain, maybe prices would be different. I really didn't consider much. I just thought Spain is just universally cheap. And now it makes me laugh because I've learned so much about, you know, visa application, finding a flat and how much it really costs, about, you know, the real cost of living. So there's so much I want to share with you today, and because I wish I had been told all of this before moving to Spain. During this video, I'll be also sharing like my actual cost of living in 2025, so that you can get a sense of how much it actually costs to live in Spain. And then there is going to be a little surprise at the end of it, so make sure you stay until the end, and I think that should be very helpful, especially if you're planning to move to Spain in 2026. So today we're going to be talking about the cost of living, everything from moving to Spain, applying to a visa if you're looking to move to Spain, because that's not cheap, and I think we don't talk about this enough. Then the cost associated with living in Spain, so that means, you know, finding a rental, grocery shopping, you know, day to day, going to the gym, getting your subscriptions. And then also we'll talk about some of the variation depending on the region where you decide to live. Like, for example, I live in Catalonia, which is one of the most expensive regions in Spain, and it's not the same thing living here or, let's say, living in Andalusia, in Malaga. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. So I moved to Barcelona, so it was in 2018. Basically, I moved here because I got a job. I got a job opportunity in Barcelona, so it was a Spanish company, English speaking. I mean, it ticked all of the boxes, and also I was just ready for a change. So I thought, you know, it's the right time. Money was a lot less, but it felt right because of, you know, what I had been told, cost of living versus salary. So in my case, because I'm French, I didn't have to do any of the visa application when moving to Spain. But I know this is a big thing for many of you guys watching today, especially for people who are from outside of the European Union. This is a big consideration. And again, I think there's not enough said about how much it costs and to apply for any type of visa in Spain, may that be the non-lucrative visa, the digital nomad visa, you know, any type of visa, it comes at a pretty high cost. So now let's look at the cost of applying for a visa. So there's many things you need to have in mind. So let me tell you a few of the items that you're going to have on your list. So imagine you are applying for a non-lucrative visa. Let's get the list up. So there's a couple of things that you need to have in mind. So you're going to need to do your FBI background check. So for that, you're going to have to apply. There's going to be an application fee, which you're going to have to pay for. So then when you're doing your FBI background check, you're also going to have to send your fingerprints. Again, there's a fee associated to it. You need to get birth certificate. You need to get, if you're married, for example, and you're applying for the non-lucrative visa, you might need to submit a marriage license. You need to get a medical certificate from a doctor, especially for the non-lucrative visa. You need to get a 1 year upfront of a health insurance. And depending if you have pre-existing condition or not, it might be more expensive or not. All of your documentation needs to be officially translated. It needs to be notarized. So all of this come at a cost. And roughly, when it comes to applying, of course, you can do it on your own, and then you would only have to pay for those items, or you can do it with an immigration lawyer, or there's different firms that can help you out. But if you do it on your own, you can think of at least between 1.5 and 2K that you need to pay upfront. So that's a given. And then if you're working with a law firm, for example, to expedite the process, you might want to think of a 3K or even more. So that's the first thing that you need to bear in mind when it comes to the cost to moving to Spain. So then, of course, the second thing is, once you got your application, you need to think about all of your travel arrangements. So you're going to have to fly from, you know, where you live to Spain. Most probably you're going to have to pay some extra for suitcases, pets. This is also something you want to bear in mind. How are you going to be moving them from the country where you're living to Spain? Again, there's cost associated with it. And depending on how late you do it, it might be higher or lower. So this is something to have in mind. And then third thing is, of course, you've moved to Spain, you're going to have to look at an accommodation. I mean, that's a given. But like I said, it really depends where in Spain you want to live. And sometimes people ask me like, how much does it cost? Is it really that cheap to live in Spain? And first of all, I'm like, I mean, Spain is a big country, so it really depends. Like I said, there's different regions. You can think of Madrid, you can think of Catalonia, you can think of Andalusia, I mean, Valencia. There's so many different regions. So depending on where you want to live, depending on if you want to live in the city center, if you want to live on the outskirts, I mean, prices will be completely different. If I, for example, talk about my own personal experience, I can tell you that I've seen so many different prices. So since I first moved to Barcelona, when I moved in 2018, so I lived a bit on the outskirts, but I was paying around 900 euros, including parking, for a big 3-bedroom flat. So this was relatively cheap. And then after that, I moved in the city center. So I moved in Pueblo Sec. So that was about, again, I was paying around 750. This time was a 1-bedroom flat, but it was in the city center. And now I'm back on the outskirts where I'm paying about 100 per month. But then again, it's a bigger flat and closer to work. And it makes sense for me. But I know that, when I'm talking about friends, like, rental you can pay up to 2k sometimes for a 2 or 3-bedroom flat in like popular places, like if you're thinking Gótico, Gracia, especially if you don't want to share. So this is something to have in mind. Then when it comes to rental, there's other things you need to think of also, because I mean, one thing is to find a flat, another is to secure it, because like I said, it's super competitive. So once you find a flat, you need to have a bit of not only like the rent ready, like to pay, but you sometimes need to pay up to 2 to 3 months rent upfront to secure the place. You need to pay for deposit also. If you're going with an agency, you might need to pay for some agency fee. So all of this adds up. So you definitely want to have that in mind when moving to Spain. Now, when it comes to utilities, this is also very important. It depends on your consumption. Like this, I can't really tell you, but you want to put aside around 200 euros for your utilities. So that would be, so I'm saying 200 euros a month. That would be gas, electricity, for your internet. So there might be some service charge depending on where you live. So this is something that you also want to put aside. Okay, now, so you move to Spain. Another thing you want to think of is your monthly living expenses. So you want to think of grocery, you want to think of eating out, activities. And this, I must say that, again, disclaimer, depends on where in Spain you decide to live. But as something I've always been surprised about, it's been how affordable the food is in Spain. So actually, I'll give you an example because I think it's the best way to illustrate like prices. So in 2018, so when I moved, I remember I went to eat in a restaurant in Sanz, and I had what they called el menú del día. So it's like you have like a 3-course meal. So you have your starter, your main course, and your dessert. And I was shocked. So first of all, because the starter was like as big as the main course, like it's a pretty big meal, and it was about 10 euros. It was 10 euros at the time. So that was, like I said, 8 years ago. And I went back to that place last month with a friend, and they still had the menú del día, but it was 17 euros. So 7 euros more, but still, for the portion, the quantity, the quality, this is very affordable. And this is something that, when it comes to Spain, this is something that's incredible. Like fruits, vegetables, and food in general, even though it's gone up, is still very, very affordable compared to other places in Europe, and let alone in America. So this is something that is definitely a major benefit when you move to Spain. So now an important thing, transportation. This is something that you definitely want to think of when you're moving to Spain. You really want to think about where exactly do you want to live. Will you be dependent on public transport? Will you need a car or not? Because this is a big thing. Because in Spain, if you have a non-European driving license, you're going to have to retake it after 6 months in order for it to be valid. So you're going to need to take a Spanish driving test, which can be quite challenging, especially if you don't speak Spanish. So you're going to have to retake it. It also can be quite expensive. And I've spoken to many people who've gone through the hassle, and it's a lot. So this is something you want to think of. And also considering how affordable public transport is in Spain, and especially in Barcelona. Imagine here you have it's called a T10. So it's like a ticket that you get, and you can do like 10 journeys, and then it gives you access all around Barcelona, like in the city center. I think it's from zone 1 to 3, I believe, or 4. And it's about, so back in 2018 it was 10 euros. Now it's about 12 euros, and it can last you a month. Super affordable. In Barcelona's case, it's quite small. Barcelona is a small place, so you can have quick access to everywhere. You can also take a bike. You can take the bike. Again, it's very easy. It's quite cheap. So I think in general, public transport is the way to go, unless you want to go very far out, and then in this case, you need to reconsider if you want to drive or not. Okay, now. So this is something I said at the beginning that I was going to share with you, are my monthly expenses. Okay, so now let's talk about my personal expenses. So again, this may vary depending on where you live, depending on how much you spend on things. But me personally, this is how my monthly cost look like as of now. So one of my biggest expense, as you can imagine, one of my biggest expenses is rent. So like I said, it's around 1,100 a month on the outskirts of Barcelona. So it's about 70 square meter. It has 2 bedrooms and it's in a fairly kind of new neighborhood. So this means that it's a new build. It was built about in 2018. So that was what I was looking for, something newer, because sometimes in Barcelona you can have a lot of old places, and that means that you don't have the aircon, you don't have heating. I mean, those are very important things, because again, misconception is that it's not always warm in Barcelona. Like right now we are in November and we're entering like the cold season, and until February it's going to be cold. And actually I started putting the heating on last week. So you want to go to a place with heating, very important. So this would be my biggest expense. And then as part of this, you have like, again, around 200 euros of utilities, including gas, electricity, water, and internet. Then my second biggest expense would be food. Currently we're 3, so it's me, my partner, and my kid. So we spend around 600 euros a month on food. Want to eat meat, we go to the butcher. If we want to get our fruits and vegetables, we usually don't get it from the supermarket, but we get it, like they call it la fruteria. It's a bit more expensive, but it's also nicer. So if you want to get fish also, so all of this, it comes at a premium, but again, 600 euros for good food, I think it's not that bad. Then you want to think of things like, the gym and just activities, leisure. So I would say like the gym, it would be like a membership, like 30 euros a month, like its typical price. I mean, this is, again, typical price. No, that's not true. Depends on the gym you want. There might be some premium gym. I go to a basic gym. It's called Viva Gym. I go there, 30 euros starting cost. And then you can think of anything else like Netflix, Spotify, usual price, 10 euros a month each. And then transportation would be a big for me. So it would be a mix of public transport and taxis. So usually I would commute, like I would take public transport. I would say I would need like 2 T10s a month. So that would be like 20 rides, 20 journeys. So that would be about, because 1 T10 is 12 euros. So that would be about 24 euros a month. And then for taxis, like let's say, like 100 a month max. In the evening, it's usually quite cheap. Like I live on the outskirts, but not too far from the city center, but too bad. Now, next, I wanted to talk about one of the biggest, most important part that some people, like myself, overlook when moving to Spain. And this is, taxes related. This is a big one. When I moved to Spain, personally, I thought, everything would happen the same way it did, like when I was in London. But I really didn't think of, the fact that each of the 17 different regions in Spain, like they have different tax brackets. Like you pay more depending on whether you're in Catalonia, if you're in Madrid. Like I didn't think about that. I didn't think that Spain also applied wealth tax, that I would need to pay taxes on assets that I would own from any other countries that are not Spain. So this was a big thing, and all of these things it can change like where you decide to move at the end of the day. So I would say that this is something you definitely want to have in mind. I live in Barcelona, so in the region of Catalonia, but it's also one of the highest taxed regions. So again, this is a big thing. So you really want to think of like the differences between region. You really want to think in terms of your assets that you have at home or abroad, because at the end of the day, like at the end of each financial year, you're going to have to report that back to Hacienda. So this is like critical, and based on maybe working, you can work with maybe a financial advisor, a tax advisor. Like I always recommend doing a simulation to understand more or less how much you may pay depending on where in Spain you decide to live. This is a must. And actually in the description, I'm going to put some links to some of the vetted tax and financial advisor I work with, because they've helped so many of my clients. Because at the end of the day, honestly, like you might want to leave, there are some people I've worked with who ended up moving to a different region because of taxes. I mean, tax related reasons. So keep this in mind. So yes, so that's been a bit of my journey moving and living in Spain. And Spain is a great place to live, but like everywhere in the world, you need to do your due diligence. So I hope this video has helped you to think of some of the different categories you want to think of before moving to Spain. So like I had said at the beginning of the video, so I had a bit of a surprise for you guys who stayed until the end. So if you did, thank you. So I created this Spain starter checklist, so which basically includes everything I wish had been told or had known before moving to Spain. So all these key considerations that you definitely want to have in mind before moving to Spain, I've consolidated it in a checklist format, and you can go through it. So I've put a link in the description, so feel free to download it and let me know if it's helpful. And as always, please send me your questions. Is there anything else you want to know about cost of living? Is there anything that's on your mind, especially for those of you moving to Spain in 2026? I'll be happy to answer in the comments. As always, thank you for staying with me until the end, and see you in the next video.
Comme un petit pégounet.